Hi everyone. I'm honored to be speaking with you all today, albeit virtually. I wish we were all together in person, but I am imagining all your smiling faces, and I'm so grateful for your time and attention. When I was 13 years old, the power of influence came into my life. It was in the form of a copywriter who was my neighbor, not because of who he was, but what he did, which is to use the power of ideas and concepts and words to help persuade people to behave differently and act differently than they normally would have. That inherently is the power of influence. And as you can imagine, as a child, we're always looking for ways to be taken more seriously and to persuade the adults around us to let us do, well, whatever we want to do. Fortunately, I didn't succeed at achieving that full autonomy at the age of 13, but I did develop a deep appreciation for how to communicate, how to really absorb the world around me, and how to express my point of view effectively. My name is Rema Vasan, and I'm the Global President of Marina Maher Communications, an integrated marketing and communications agency encompassing both MMC, Marina Maher Communications, as well as RXMosaic. And we are a proud part of the Omnicom Public Relations Group. We really have MMC positioned as a next generation communications agency that uses the power of influence and culture to catapult businesses and get the world talking. And I'm incredibly excited to talk to you about that exact topic today. As a first generation immigrant from India who's come to the United States, and as someone who's had a really non-linear career trajectory across different facets of marketing, whether it's advertising, digital marketing, and communications, I truly believe that diversity in thought and perspective is one of the greatest assets that you can bring to any organization. And having lived and worked in Asia, specifically India, Europe, and North America, I've seen firsthand the impact that influence and culture has on business through many different lenses, and I'm really excited to talk to you about that today. So let's talk about influence and culture. You're going to hear a lot of discussion around reputation management during these next few days. It goes without saying that we all recognize how important the reputation of brands and businesses are. The good news is that there are a number of tools in our toolbox to help us navigate the challenges of reputation management. But two of my favorites are influence and culture. They can be very powerful tools, but really do require careful identification of people and organizations that influence your brand's audience the most, and an in-depth understanding of your audience and the world in which they live. Culture. Culture is really organic, it's dynamic, it's ever-changing, and it's as globally diverse as the people who propel it forward. Influence is most certainly in the eye of the beholder and often generated by influencers of all types. People typically think of social media creators, but influencers can include celebrities or athletes, subject matter experts like scientists or credentialers. They can be your friends and family. They can be online raters and reviewers. They can be the news media, NGOs, and other advocacy organizations, both globally and or locally. But the one thing they all have in common is that they are people, and people are unpredictable. So when you get this combination of the dynamic nature of culture with the unpredictability of influencers, you get a really interesting challenge that involves a really tenuous balancing act. I often equate it to successfully growing houseplants. You know you need to water them, you know that they need sunlight. Some may need more water and sun than the others, and we have to be very precise in the amount of water and sun that these plants get. In the same way that not all influencers are the same. Needless to say, I've certainly killed some plants, but thankfully I've gotten much better at nourishing and growing them. So even though this balancing act can be tricky, it is worth the effort. Influencers and culture have a very special relationship. Culture can create influencers, and influencers can shape culture. For example, the outrage that so many young people felt and continue to feel towards the neglect of our planet and what they see as collective inaction of older generations found an unlikely hero in a young Swedish teenager with Asperger's. While I don't know her personally, I doubt that Greta Thunberg woke up one day and said, I want to be an influencer. She wanted to save the planet. And the importance of climate change and culture made her an influential voice. On the flip side, Lily Singh, YouTube's superwoman, enjoyed an extremely lucrative career that has earned her recognition from Forbes as the 8th top-earning YouTuber of 2015. She has since also been able to use her influence to change the culture around late-night TV, becoming the first queer woman of color to host a late-night talk show. Let's just say it was a significant change from the norm, at least as it relates to late-night shows in the United States. So when I said that influence and culture are my favorite tools in the toolbox, it wasn't because they're the easiest, it's because I believe that they can catapult businesses. We have a saying at MMC, complacency makes us restless because innovation is our oxygen. I am so inspired by my team's passion for innovation, and I learn from them every day. Through our collective work, we've found that success is really grounded in creative ideas and innovations that live at the intersection of a brand's audience and culture. So to harness the potential of culture and influence and catapult businesses forward, we look to this simple formula. Reach plus relevance plus authority equals influence. Why reach? Brands need to influence their target audiences in order to generate measurable business results. So we need to reach the right people at a scale that will drive volume and impact. Why relevance? Brand relevance is almost more important than ever before. Brands are prioritizing finding and amplifying their purpose and their place in culture that surrounds them. Storytelling is the medium through which brands can effectively portray their cultural relevance, because storytelling is one of the oldest ways that humans have used to make sense of the world and subsequently a brand. Why authority? Because of the rise in social media platforms, the explosion of content creation, the democratization of content distribution, and the epidemic of misinformation, people have rightfully gotten skeptical. Authority gives them a reason to trust you as a brand and the brand's messengers. Not all influencers will deliver both reach and authority, and that's okay. Because when you look at the combination of influencers that you partner with, they should collectively deliver on reach and authority, as well as help tell your brand story of purpose and your place in culture. So let's talk about how to activate with excellence. How do you set yourself and your brand up for success? I don't claim to have all the answers, but I would like to share with you 4 best practices that we've established at MMC. Audience first planning, cultural trend sensing, high impact creative, measurement, and optimization. So the key benefit of audience first planning are streamlining the selection of the right influencers who will be the most influential with your brand's audiences, and using data to make informed, creative, and messaging choices. Your consumers or customers are always the most profound source of communications inspiration, and we now live in a world where inspiration can be unlocked through audience data. Take a look at who they follow and how they spend their time, both online and offline. What motivates them to act? Craft your messages, influencer, and platform choices based upon these insights. One of the additional benefits of taking an audience-first planning approach to influencer marketing is the ability to easily define the audiences you would like to boost the influencer's posts to. With organic reach being what it is across so many platforms that we rely on, paid boosting or amplification has become a requirement for many campaigns around the world. In order to reach the largest number of people who will find the content relevant and appealing, you can use audience data to create those targetable segments and reach them using paid social media. The next best practice is cultural trend sensing. We've talked a lot about culture. In order to maximize the impact that culture and influence can have on your business, it's important to constantly mine conversation, be it social conversation and others, as well as third-party sources for lead indicators of burgeoning cultural trends. Social listening tools are an excellent way to track these trends, as are consumer panel studies. Next, I would recommend that you translate your cultural understanding into the design of meaningful content. Sounds so easy, right? You guessed it, it's now. That's why the marriage of art and science is so critical. Fortunately, we have an earned first data backed approach to generating ideas that live at the intersection of consumer and cultural insights with the goal to really create that emotional connection between the brand and its audiences. So, when considering an opportunity to engage in a cultural moment, ask yourself, what does my audience care about? This is important to ask because you want to establish whether it's a fleeting moment in time to capitalize on or a true cultural shift that we need to commit to long term. Think about Nike's commitment to the Black Lives Matter movement. They knew that the historical treatment of the Black community by the justice system has had a profound impact on virtually every person they consider to be in their target audience. This was never going to be a fleeting moment in time, but rather a lifelong reality, and it was time for the change. This commitment on behalf of the brand has impacted both their influencer selection as well as their creative development and has certainly paid off. Their top line sales rose 31% after their ad with Colin Kaepernick, for instance. Next, it's important to ask, are my brand values aligned or even additive to this conversation? This is to determine whether or not your brand has a natural role in the discussion. It's never a good idea to force yourself into a conversation or spontaneously show up without any history of prior commitment. It might even show how completely out of touch brands can be if this isn't followed. And finally, can I demonstrate how my brands or products can be used within this cultural context? One of the best examples of showcasing authentic proof that their products belong in the lives of their target consumers is some of the work that we've done with Downy, which is a fabric softener in the United States. Downy has a product called Downy Beads. And the primary business challenge is that very few people know how to use laundry beads, and even if they need them at all. So we used influencers to educate consumers on how to use laundry beads and show the benefit and reward in the context of their life. Certain segments of the laundry buying population have specific interests and habits that cause a greater need to use beads. For instance, gym goers with smelly workout clothes because they need the scent, and fashionistas with really precious clothing. So protection is the benefit there. Gym goers were already buying, but fashionistas weren't. So we partnered with influencers with those same interests and created content specifically for each of these audiences. The result was a significant increase in purchase consideration. And of course, happy clients as well. In addition to determining the role of your brand and its alignment with culture, you want to pick the right partners to execute. And because you want the influencer partners you select to actually influence their audience, giving them the creative license is really non-negotiable. But of course, we want to ensure these partnerships are generating the business impact that we need. So we recommend developing a brief that is a flexible framework. So in other words, what we're doing is really giving those influencers flexibility within the framework of the brand requirements. It'll include key messaging points, insights about the larger brand audience, and it'll also include some of the answers to the questions that we just discussed. Now let's chat measurement. If influencer marketing wasn't intended to generate business results, well, we wouldn't call it marketing. But I would be lying if I said that effectively measuring the impact that influencer efforts have had on business hasn't been a challenge that has plagued the industry for years. There continues to be attribution gaps when you compare to paid digital and social media, but we've really come a long way. So I recommend creating a measurement framework that tracks relevant metrics to the overall business objectives of the brand. Influencer marketing should not live in a vacuum. It should be part of the overall marketing mix, and it should not just be measured by reach, engagement, etc. Catapulting your business forward ensures that your use of influence and culture are having a measurable impact on the higher order business KPIs. For example, reach is a great metric to measure awareness, but not necessarily an indicator of future sales activity. Sales can be measured by tools such as online and offline conversion data or swipe to buy, coupon redemption, etc. Next comes the fun part, optimization. The reason that generating key learnings about what worked and what didn't is more feasible than it has been. That's because our audience-first approach to planning gives us much more granular visibility into the strategic inputs and variables. So when you start with data first, you're able to create testing and optimization scenarios that are easier to interpret and replicate. And so to close out, all brands have a unique brand and equally unique business challenge. Some brands want to change perception, others want to launch new products or services, some want to increase household penetration of existing product lines, and others want to attract new audiences. So let's talk about how we can future-proof your efforts. Regardless of the objective, influencer marketing continues to evolve and mature over time, and brands find new and exciting ways to catapult their business forward. Some of the emerging trends that we see coming in the next several months are sure to continue to change the trajectory. We see 4 trends gaining traction: social commerce and shoppable video, diversity and representation at the core, keep it real for Gen Z, and the rise of audio influencers. While social commerce has been incredibly prevalent in Southeast Asia for years, the same popularity is making its way to US and Europe. All of the major social platforms are racing to make their platform the most commerce-friendly for brands and influencers alike. We're currently witnessing a features and function arms race with the annual growth rate of social commerce around 31%. The global market is expected to hit over $600 billion by 2027. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and Twitter are all platforms to watch this year. Talking about diversity and representation at the core. The past year has certainly given rise to a great deal of conversation, activism, and corporate commitments around diversity and inclusion. But it's important that these commitments and conversations are carried through with actual efforts that showcase how they're being brought to life. Diversity and representation needs to be core at a brand's efforts for marrying culture and influence, focused on meaningful inclusion and equal compensation. A good example here is in a program that we did for one of our clients, Venus, which is a global women's razor brand. The core business challenge was to make Venus relevant during the key grooming season, summer, and bring the beach to life virtually in a post-pandemic world. We helped develop a program that was based upon the cultural insight that 47% of gamers in the United States are Gen Z women, yet the industry overall is lacking in gender equality, diversity, and representation. So we developed a program where skinclusivity, in other words, inclusion of all types of skin, meets Animal Crossing, which is, if you didn't already know, Animal Crossing is a social simulation video game that has become a cultural sensation. We enlisted a digital costume designer to co-create the skinclusive fashion line in Animal Crossing and developed a complete lookbook for fans and players to download for free and access in-game. We also partnered with influential, credible voices that are relevant to our target and the gaming community, including celebrity host Maitreyi Ramakrishnan, who's also an Animal Crossing gamer. You might have seen her in Never Have I Ever on Netflix. And finally, we hosted a live stream event to engage the community and showcase Venus's commitment to the cause on National Beach Day by unveiling a contribution to the Women in Games. The results are incredible, both in terms of reach as well as in terms of sentiment and engagement. And importantly, our target audience really viewed this partnership as a way to shine light on both skinclusivity and women in gaming. Keeping it real for Gen Z. This generation of people born between 1997 and 2012 are really skeptical of influencer marketing, or they can be. Most of them haven't known a time where influencers didn't exist, and therefore they've gotten really good at sniffing out fact from fiction, which is why nano-influencers can be an important part of the mix, because they aren't famous, and the results for the brands can bear this out in spades. Nano-influencers command 4 times, roughly, the engagement from their followers than larger social media influencers. This is because they're really accessible and highly responsive to their followers. This was in a recent study that found that this coveted access that they provide to their audience can be credited with procuring 11 times the ROI of a digital marketing campaign. In addition to selecting really trusted influencers for Gen Z, you need to really think about how the brand can be transparent and authentically connected to the aspect of culture that you are choosing to align yourself with. They want to know that your brand is fully committed to that aspect of the world that you live in and is fundamentally consistent with your brand values. The last trend, of course, is the rise of audio influencers. There's a lot of buzz about live audio conversation that's been occurring on Clubhouse. Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit have all developed competitive products like Twitter Spaces, Facebook Live Audio Rooms, and Reddit Talk. Some have been launched and some are still to be launched, but they're all in testing mode with limited access. There's no doubt that brand partnerships on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube are really paying dividends for marketers. But the content and the experience on Clubhouse is quite different and unique. So, partnering with influencers on Clubhouse can offer a different and unique way to bolster your brand perception and diversify your current content mix. Of course, I would only recommend this if the Clubhouse as a platform is relevant to your audience. So, in closing, I'll leave you with this. The future of our industry is really bright and evolving, and it's such an exciting time to be in communications. If you take anything from what I've shared today, I hope it's an understanding of how critical influence and culture are as aspects to be at the forefront of our marketing strategies. We can't hope to influence audiences without acknowledging and appreciating, what drives them and how they move through the world. I think back to that 13-year-old girl that I told you about, in awe of the power of communications, and I know that she would be more inspired than ever with the possibilities that arise in front of us today. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Rema, for that great session. I had a few questions that I had prepared for your session, and I hope I can get to that right now. So I read a recent article in the New York Times about Amanda Foreman becoming the global change maker for Estee Lauder, as opposed to a brand ambassador or a face. The article alluded to how this reflects a change in the balance of power in the current consumer reality, in which the influence of real people can carry more weight than the purely transactional nature of the celebrity model relationship, where substance is particularly prized. What more should brands be doing to ensure these partnerships feel authentic to their audience?
So, thinking about trust, yes, influencer marketing has gone very much from a sort of organic grassroots industry to a mega industry in terms of size and expansion and impact. Is it a major marketing lever? Absolutely. Is there a way to retain trust while executing impactful influencer marketing? Also, absolutely. And the way to do that really is what I talked about earlier, which is allowing the influencers to be authentic and true to who they are, because that's what their audiences want from them. I understand that, of course, this has to be done within the parameters of the brand, and hence why that flexibility within the framework that I talked about earlier is incredibly important to make sure that they understand the brand guidelines and tone of voice and what aspect of culture they're tying themselves to, their values, so that the influencer can then create content in a way that's authentic to them, but organically integrates the brand into their lives and into their content.
How has the focus on DEI impacted the influencer marketing space?
So that's a really great question. Thank you. You heard in the keynote the example that we talked about around Venus and the work we did on this inclusivity campaign with Animal Crossing. So that's a good example of how DE&I is really making its impact felt in the influencer marketing space. Thinking about how the industries continue to evolve in these areas, and particularly with the US lens, I would say that overall brands are increasing their focus on diversity, which is leading to greater partnership opportunities for diverse influencers. And this is great, but consumers are simultaneously holding brands accountable for putting the work in behind the scenes and going beyond just diversifying their creators. Along with this increased appetite from consumers for racially and ethnically diverse brand partners, There's also a desire to see representation in varied forms of diversity, including body types, neurodiversity, disabilities, age, gender, and so much more. And really, this means that brand need to really expand and continue to redefine the way we perceive diversity. Influencers are expected more and more to speak up for their beliefs and represent their values in the content that they create. Advocating for DE&I rights is seen as a particularly important trait amongst influencers by various consumers, including Gen Z that we talked about. And then finally, brands also need to consider how they build their budgets for influencer programs. There's an increased focus amongst the industry in bridging the pay gap, amongst influencers of color and their white counterparts. And so, really approaching with fair and equitable fees based on the content deliverables and the influencers' expertise will really help bridge that pay gap if brands want to continue seeing the same results while bridging those pay gaps. So, that's something to consider as well.
How should a brand measure the impact of an influencer marketing campaign?
So, measurement, the $1 million question, quite literally. I think really thinking about how at the outset you set a clear objective for your campaign and picking one or two metrics that closely shows whether or not you're meeting that objective. So, for instance, you may want to raise awareness for your brands. So, if so, you would focus on reach. You may want to drive product sales, so you would focus on conversion. Not every piece of content can do it all. So, a clear objective ahead of time will really help influencers create the content in a way that will work the hardest for the brand. Also, thinking about historical results can help inform the future. So, learning from the past to help inform the future forecast potential. So, while there are individual campaigns, looking at sort of the data in totality can be really valuable for organizations to really understand what to anticipate from future campaigns and measure if you're continuing to improve.
What is your hope for the future of communications as it continues to evolve?
So, my hope for the future of communications is, as I had mentioned earlier, I have a bit of a nonlinear career trajectory. And I've been in communications for the last a little over 6 years. And the reason I came into communications is because I was fascinated by the power of earning attention. And a mentor of mine said to me, earned communications is going to be the true future of marketing, because when you truly earn your way into your consumer or your audience's hearts and minds, that's the way that's going to generate the greatest impact. And that really stayed with me. And I think really tapping into that power of earning attention in a way that's impactful and at scale, and in a way that's measurable against business objectives, I realize that that's the holy grail. But that's really, I think, what my hope for the future of communications is that we continue to innovate to tap into that power of communications while showcasing the measurable ROI and impact that it has across businesses, so that we're able to scale our efforts and really continue to showcase innovation that drives that impact.
Thank you, Rema. It was great speaking to you.
Thank you.